Have you ever had that moment, when you like first come across an idea that just kind of grabs you and like it just sticks with you?
Uh-huh.
One of those for me was Vygotsky's zone of proximal development, or ZPD.
Yeah.
You probably heard about it like in a teacher training or you read an article or something, and it sounds really like fascinating.
Right.
This idea that there's like a sweet spot for learning where a little help can just make a huge difference. But then you kind of step back and you're like, wait a minute. Is there more to the story?
Right.
Like, am I only seeing, just this one slice of it?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think a lot of people have that reaction to the ZPD.
Right.
It's this powerful idea,
Yeah.
but it can feel a little incomplete.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we're going to be diving into today.
Okay, cool.
This isn't just going to be, your typical like ZPD 101 like you might get in a textbook or something.
Right.
We're going way deeper,
Yeah.
and we're looking at it from a brand new perspective.
Okay.
And you know what? You actually gave us the perfect article to dig into for this deep dive.
Oh, awesome.
It's called Reconceptualizing the Zone of Proximal Development: The Importance of the Third Voice
Oh, very cool.
by Notek and Heining Boynton. It's from 2008.
Okay.
And our mission today is to go beyond that like traditional surface level understanding of the ZPD
Yeah.
and really unpack what these authors are arguing.
Yeah. So just to remind everyone, including myself, to be honest,
Sure.
what is that like traditional view of the ZPD?
So, going back to Vygotsky himself, he described the zone of proximal development as that distance between what a learner can do when they're just working on their own
Okay.
versus what they can achieve when they have guidance and support from someone who's, more knowledgeable or more skilled.
Right. Like a teacher, a tutor, even a peer.
Exactly. And the whole idea is that learning happens as the learner internalizes these new mental tools,
Okay.
right? So things like language, problem-solving strategies, ways of thinking that help them make sense of the world and navigate their experiences.
Right.
And a lot of times this happens, through interactions and collaborations with someone who already has a grasp of those tools.
Yeah. It's like, having a friend who's really good at something like, skateboarding or whatever.
Uh-huh.
And they show you the ropes. They give you just enough support and encouragement so that you can start to get it. And then they gradually step back as you become more independent.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's all about that back and forth, right? That interaction between the learner and the guide.
Right.
But here's the thing. This article that you sent us
Mm-hmm.
suggests that this like two-person interaction isn't the whole story.
Oh, really?
There's more going on behind the scenes.
Okay.
They argue that there's this other force influencing what happens in the learning zone, something they call the third voice.
The third voice.
Yes, and they say this third voice has a huge impact on whether a learner really develops and grows, or if their learning is somehow limited or even misdirected.
Okay. That is intriguing. So let's unpack that. What do they mean by the third voice?
All right, so to understand the third voice, we kind of have to take a little detour into a related field called semiotics.
Semiotics.
Yeah, specifically the work of a thinker named Mikhail Bakhtin.
Okay.
Now, semiotics is basically the study of signs and symbols and how we create meaning from them.
Okay.
And the authors of this article, they use Bakhtin's ideas about something called dialogicality and voice.
Okay.
They argue that when we look at interactions where learning's happening, it's not just this straightforward exchange between two people.
Okay.
There's a whole bigger context shaping how those two people are communicating.
Right. So it's more than just the words that are being said. There's all this other stuff going on.
Exactly.
Okay. So to clarify, if we've got these, these voices, the first voice is the person guiding the teacher, the mentor, whoever. And the second voice is the learner, the person who's trying to develop that new skill or understand that new concept.
Right.
Where does this third voice come in?
Okay, so the third voice isn't a literal person speaking. It's more like the immediate agenda of the ZPD.
An agenda.
Yeah, and not just like the specific learning goals for that one lesson,
Okay.
but also all the wider pressures and priorities that might be influencing the person providing that guidance, the first voice.
I see.
So it's kind of like the background noise of the learning environment.
Interesting. Okay.
And the key thing here is that this third voice doesn't just exist out there somewhere. It actually impacts how the first voice operates.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it influences their thoughts, their perceptions, the way they see the situation, the approaches they choose.
So a teacher's understanding and their actions when they're helping a student aren't only based on, their own knowledge of the subject or what they think the student needs.
Exactly. There are all these other factors at play, things that are influencing their intrapsychological functioning.
Intrapsychological. What was that word?
Intrapsychological functioning.
Oh,
Basically, it's just a fancy way of saying someone's internal thoughts and mental processes.
God.
And the third voice is in there messing with that internal world of the guide.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Right, and this is where it gets really crucial.
Hmm.
The authors point out that whether this third voice's agenda actually aligns with the bigger goals of development within the ZPD,
Okay.
that's what determines if the learner is truly growing and becoming more capable,
Mm.
or if they're just kind of, learning in this very limited or narrow way.
So why do the authors think we need to rethink the ZPD in this way? What are we missing if we stick with that, traditional two-person model?
Their main point is that we need to understand the ZPD within its cultural and historical context
Okay.
to get a deeper, richer understanding of what Vygotsky was really trying to say.
Right, because he was writing, almost 100 years ago in a very different place.
Exactly. And they point out that, interpreting Vygotsky can be tricky.
Uh-huh.
I mean, there are challenges with translation.
Right.
His original work was in Russian.
Right.
Plus, he didn't always give super detailed explanations of his ideas.
Uh-huh.
And then, to make things even more complicated, some of his writings are still unpublished.
Right, so it's like trying to solve a puzzle with some of the pieces missing.
Yeah, and the authors emphasize that Vygotsky was working in a culture that was what we call high context,
That context.
which basically means people relied a lot on shared understanding and unspoken assumptions.
Oh, I see. So, a lot of things were implied rather than directly stated.
Exactly, and that can make it difficult for us to understand his ideas today.
Right, especially if we come from a culture where, clear and direct communication is valued.
Exactly. So to really grasp what Vygotsky was getting at with the ZPD,
Yeah.
we need to understand the intellectual climate, the social and cultural forces that were shaping his thinking.
Okay, so let's talk about some of those forces.
Okay, so picture Russia in the early 20th century, like right after the revolution.
Uh-huh.
Huge social and political upheaval,
Mm.
and all of this is happening while Vygotsky is developing his theories.
Right. It was a time of huge change and new ideas were emerging everywhere.
Exactly. It was a very exciting time intellectually, and people were really rethinking every aspect of society, including education and psychology.
Right. And before we dive into the specifics of, who influenced Vygotsky, I just remembered something you said earlier that I thought was so interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Vygotsky didn't start out as a psychologist.
Right. He actually began his career as a literary critic.
Really?
He was fascinated by literature language, the arts.
That's so cool.
And even as he moved into psychology, he kept that connection to his early interests.
So that background in literature must have shaped his views on development and learning.
Oh, absolutely. His understanding of language and communication were central to his psychological theories.
That makes so much sense.
So now let's jump back to those intellectual currents that were swirling around Vygotsky.
Okay.
In the field of literary studies, there was this new school of thought called Russian formalism.
Russian formalism.
Yeah, they were all about making literary study more scientific and rigorous. They focused on the internal structure of literary texts, the nuts and bolts of how they worked.
Uh-huh.
And they emphasized the unique qualities of literary language, what made it different from everyday speech.
I see. So how poets use words in a way that creates these layers of meaning and imagery.
Exactly. They were all about form and structure, the way language is used to create art.
So that's Russian formalism. What else was going on at the time?
At the same time, you have the rise of semiotics,
Okay.
which, remember, is the study of signs and symbols and how we create meaning through communication.
Right. And you mentioned Mikhail Bakhtin earlier. He was part of that movement, right?
Yes, Bakhtin was a major figure in Soviet semiotics.
Okay.
And he came up with this incredibly important idea called dialogicality.
Dialogical. Okay, this is a big one, right?
It's fundamental to understanding the third voice.
Okay, I'm right. Lay it on me.
So Bakhtin argued that every time we say something, every utterance,
Uh-huh.
it's not just this isolated thing that comes out of nowhere.
Right.
It's part of a bigger ongoing dialogue.
Mhm.
Every time we speak or write, we're responding to things that have been said before,
Uh-huh.
and we're also anticipating how others might respond in the future.
Right. Even if we're not consciously thinking about it, we're always part of this bigger web of communication.
Exactly. Nothing we say or even think happens in a vacuum.
Okay, so even a single sentence is like a tiny piece of a much larger conversation.
Precisely. And the authors of the article point out that both Russian formalism and semiotics were all about language.
Right.
And that makes sense because, language is how we communicate, how we share ideas, how we make meaning.
Right.
And Vygotsky's own ideas about signs and how we use them, especially language, to guide our thinking and actions.
Right.
Those were definitely influenced by these broader intellectual trends.
ABC.
There's even some evidence that Vygotsky knew about Russian formalism,
Okay.
and some scholars think there might have even been a connection between him and Bakhtin, though that's still, up for debate.
So it sounds like Vygotsky wasn't just focused on the individual learner in isolation.
Right.
He was always thinking about the larger context of culture and language and how those things shape our development.
Absolutely. And that brings us back to how we understand the idea of dialogue within the ZPD.
Okay, so let's connect those dots.
Right, so Vygotsky himself was very clear that a child doesn't just learn by figuring things out on their own.
Right.
They learn through interactions with others with guidance and support.
Right.
And that conversation, that back and forth between the helper and the learner,
Uh-huh.
that's crucial for the learner to internalize new knowledge and skills.
Yeah, it's not just about getting the right answer.
Right.
It's about understanding the process, the thinking behind it, the language that's used.
Exactly.
Sure.
But here's where the authors bring in Bakhtin's idea of Vygotsky.
Okay.
They argue that this conversation between the helper and the learner isn't just this simple exchange.
Uh-huh.
There's a whole lot more going on beneath the surface.
Yeah.
There are these hidden voices, these broader influences that are shaping how that interaction unfolds.
Oh, I see.
Bakhtin said that every utterance, every time we say something, it has a voice, and it's part of a bigger dialogue.
Okay.
And that even applies to our own thoughts.
Wow.
Even our internal thinking is dialogic.
So, like, when I'm just thinking to myself, it's like I'm having a conversation with myself.
Exactly, and that internal conversation is shaped by all the voices we've encountered throughout our lives.
It's like all those voices from our past are still in there, influencing our thoughts.
Right, and as the authors point out, James Virch, who's a leading Vygotsky scholar, he suggests that Vygotsky's concept of intra-psychological functioning,
Here's that word again?
remember that refers to our inner mental processes.
Right.
Virch says that we can understand that better by looking at Bakhtin's idea of hidden dialogicality.
Okay, so now we're starting to see how this third voice operates. It's part of this larger invisible conversation.
Right, and it's shaping the interactions within the ZPD.
So how does that actually play out in a real learning situation?
Well, this is where the work of two other researchers, Chain and Tarulli, becomes really important.
Okay.
They suggest that the third voice has a kind of authority within the ZPD.
Authority.
Yeah, and that it often speaks through the first voice, the guide, or the helper. They use this term ventriloquation to describe this process.
Ventriloquation.
Yeah, it's like the third voice is using the first voice as a puppet.
Oh, I get it. Like the third voice is making the helper say or do certain things.
Exactly, and ultimately what the learner takes away from the ZPD is also influenced by this third voice because it shapes how the helper presents information and guides the learning process.
So the third voice is kind of setting the boundaries and the direction for what can happen within the ZPD?
Precisely, and the authors emphasize that this influence can be super widespread, affecting lots of interactions within the ZPD, whether or not the goals of that third voice actually align with the ultimate goal of development.
Right, because sometimes those goals might match up.
But sometimes they might be totally different.
Exactly. And they give a great example of this, something I think a lot of people can relate to, standardized testing.
Oh yeah, that's a big one.
Standardized testing is a perfect example of the third voice in action.
Okay, how so?
Well, it's not the testing itself that's necessarily the problem.
Okay.
It's how it impacts the thinking and actions of the teacher, the first voice, in their role as someone who's guiding and supporting learning.
Right.
And remember what Virch said, even our most personal thoughts are influenced by this larger context of dialogue.
Right, so if there's a huge emphasis on standardized testing and getting those high scores, that becomes a really powerful third voice in the classroom.
Absolutely. And it can put a lot of pressure on teachers to teach to the test.
Yeah, instead of focusing on deeper understanding and critical thinking.
Right. Their main goal might shift to just making sure students can pass the test.
And the problem with that is...
Well, the problem is that what's on those standardized tests and how they're formatted,
it doesn't always align with the broader goals of learning.
Right, like being able to use your knowledge in real-world situations.
Exactly, and the authors point out that for the third voice to have this kind of influence, it has to be able to shape the thoughts and perceptions of the first voice.
Okay.
And high-stakes testing definitely has that power.
Does.
And this connects to an idea from another educational psychologist, Jerome Bruner. He argued that Our educational practices, our methods of teaching and learning, are based on these broader cultural beliefs about what the purpose of education is.
Right.
So if we believe that the main point of education is to get good test scores,
Yeah.
well, that belief will inevitably shape how we teach and what we prioritize in the classroom.
Right.
And that brings us back to the heart of the ZPD.
Yeah. What it's really all about.
Development.
Yeah.
The authors are very specific about what they mean by that.
Okay.
They emphasize that development, or razavity, as Vygotsky called it, it's not just about learning isolated facts or skills.
Okay.
It's about becoming a competent and independent person within your culture, internalizing the tools and the knowledge that are valued in your society.
So it's about more than just knowing the right answers.
Yeah.
It's about being able to use your knowledge and skills to navigate the world around you.
Exactly. And a key sign of true development is being able to take what you've learned and apply it in new and different situations.
Right. So it's not just about performing well in one specific context. It's about being able to generalize your learning.
Exactly. And this is where the third voice becomes problematic.
Okay.
When its goals don't align with this bigger picture of development and the ability to adapt and use your knowledge flexibly.
Right.
If we only focus on the interaction between the helper and the learner, we might miss the powerful influence of this third voice.
I see.
And we might not have an accurate picture of what true development looks like.
So even if a student can solve problems on their own, it doesn't necessarily mean they've truly developed if they can't transfer those skills to other situations.
Exactly. That's a crucial distinction. While the traditional view might see independent problem solving as the goal of the ZPD, the third voice idea adds this whole other layer of understanding.
And it makes us question what we really mean by success.
Right. And to really grasp Vygotsky's ideas, we can't just focus on his words.
Okay.
We have to consider that broader cultural and historical context, all those unseen forces that were shaping his thinking.
And the authors do acknowledge that Vygotsky himself didn't explicitly connect his work on the ZPD to Bakhtin's ideas about dialogue or this concept of the third voice.
It's true. He didn't use those exact terms.
Right.
But a lot of researchers, including the authors of this article, find this connection to be really helpful in illuminating Vygotsky's work.
So it's like a lens that helps us see things more clearly.
Exactly. And it brings up this important question. What is influencing the helper's own thinking and approach within the ZPD?
Yeah, that's something that the traditional model doesn't fully address.
Right. It just focuses on the observable interactions between the two people.
And that brings us back to the example of high-stakes testing.
Yes.
If a teacher is only focused on teaching those test-taking strategies, even if students learn those strategies and can pass the test, it might not translate into real deep understanding or the ability to use that knowledge in other situations.
Exactly. That's what we mean by the inability to generalize.
Right. It's like they've learned a very specific skill, but they haven't really developed a deeper understanding that they can apply more broadly.
And the authors give another example that really illustrates this point.
Okay.
They talk about students learning English as a second language. And these students were able to learn specific test-taking strategies that allow them to pass an English proficiency test. But they couldn't actually use those language skills in everyday situations. Like they couldn't understand the temperature on a thermometer.
Wow.
Or manage their money.
That's a big disconnect.
Right. And from the traditional ZPD perspective, it might look like learning happened.
Right.
Because there was guidance, there was interaction, the students internalized some information. But the third voice perspective helps us see why true development, that broader ability to function in the culture, didn't really occur.
I see.
Because the immediate goal of passing the test was not aligned with that larger goal of developing real-world language proficiency.
Right. So the third voice in this case was actually hindering development.
Exactly.
Okay, so what's the solution? How do we deal with this problem of things not aligning?
The authors argue that the key is to make that hidden dialogicality more explicit.
Explicit.
Yeah, to bring it out into the open.
Okay.
The person providing the guidance, the helper, they need to become aware of all the different factors that are influencing how they're guiding the learning process.
So like a teacher needs to really think about the pressures and goals that are shaping how they teach.
Exactly. And that awareness can help prevent those situations where we think development has happened. Just because a learner can now do something independently in a limited context.
Right.
By shining a light on these influencing factors,
Yeah.
we can make more conscious choices about how we're guiding learning and ensure that it's truly promoting development.
That makes sense. So for our listeners who've been with us on this deep dive,
Uh-huh.
what's the big takeaway here?
The main point is that to really understand how learning happens best,
Uh-huh.
we can't just focus on the interaction between the learner and the helper.
Okay.
We have to consider that often invisible third voice,
Right.
those hidden agendas and influences that are shaping the learning environment.
And that's true whether you're the one doing the teaching or the learning.
Absolutely, if you're in any role where you're helping others learn and grow. It's so important to think carefully about the pressures and goals that might be unconsciously shaping your approach.
Yeah. Are you really helping someone develop deep, flexible understanding?
Right.
Or are you being driven by a third voice that might be limiting their potential?
That's the question we all need to ask ourselves.
And if you're the one doing the learning, it's important to think about the bigger picture of why you're learning something and whether the way you're learning it is really leading to that deeper, more transferable understanding.
It's about being mindful and intentional in our approach to both teaching and learning.
This has been such a thought-provoking conversation.
Yeah, it's really made me think about all those hidden forces that are at play in any learning situation.
Right, and how we can become more aware of them and make choices that support genuine development.
Absolutely. It's not always easy, but it's definitely worth the effort.
I think that's a great place to wrap up this deep dive.
I agree.
Thanks for joining us, everyone, and until next time, happy learning.
Bye.